and welcome back to Everything DIY. We recently installed some coilovers in our Mazda Speed 3, and we did put those into the recommended settings so that we could break them in a bit. After about 2,000 miles of driving, we're going to go ahead and adjust them to our own personal settings. Just to be clear, in this video we'll be covering 4-corner height adjustment with reasonable balance in mind, as well as compression and rebound adjustment. The tools we're going to be using for this project include a tape measure, masking tape, Sharpie, Jackstands, a ratchet, a few sockets, a hex socket, and a spanner wrench. So before we actually start, you want to make sure that you're on a level surface, that you have about a half a tank of gas in your car, and that all 4 tires have the correct amount of air. Good. Our first task is to get our car to the height we like. Also, our manufacturer suggests, for good balance, that the distance between the center of the tire and the fender be equal on all sides. So we'll be keeping this in mind throughout the video. So something optional you can do to get a bit better balance out of your car, and that's to take into account the driver's weight on the driver's side. So what we're gonna do is just add some weights in, because if you don't account for it, one side of the car will be slightly higher than the other. Now that we have the proper amount of weight in the car, we can go ahead and start measuring. Like I said, we do like the ride height, but we can tell that it's not equal on all sides. So we're just going to go ahead and start measuring to see how much adjustment we need. So first I'm going to take some tape and I'm going to put it on the center of the wheel. Alright. And then I'm going to measure first the diameter of the wheel. Okay, right down the middle. We have 49, and the center is 24 and a half. So I'm going to mark that with a Sharpie. Now I can measure the distance from the fender to the center. So we'll do that now. We have 34 centimeters. I'm going to write that down. And I'm going to do this exact same thing on all the other wheels. Alright, so we've measured all 4 of the wheels, and this is what we got. As you can see, we need to do a bit of adjusting to get it to a level height. What our goal is to get it to 342 millimeters, and these are the adjustments in millimeters that we're going to be doing for each tire. So let's start with the rear. So the first thing you need to do is to lift the car on both sides to remove as much preload on the springs as possible. And we did this using the center of the rear cross member and supporting with 2 jacks. You don't need to remove the 2 rear wheels unless, of course, you have a strut assembly. Next, we need to locate our rear spring perch. For our car, our rear spring sits on top of the perch, but for some of you, the perch may actually be on top of the spring. Don't worry if your perch doesn't look like ours. For most part, they all function in a similar manner. Before we start adjusting, we want to make sure we measure how much thread is exposed beneath our perch. I'm going to do that now. Okay. So I have 11.3, so I'm going to write that down. If you remember, my measurement for this wheel was 339 millimeters. We want it to be at 342. In order to get our desired height, we need to raise this side 3 millimeters. So instead of 11.3 millimeters of exposed thread, we want 8.3 millimeters. The less amount of exposed thread you have, the higher the ride height, and vice versa. Before we start the adjustment, we want to make sure we're loosening the locking collar, and we have these 3 hex bolts here. So I'm going to start loosening those now. Once those are loose, we need to grab a hex key or a spanner wrench, depending on the type of perch you have. Then we're going to rotate clockwise in order to raise the side a bit. We'll keep rotating the perch till the threads measure 8.3 millimeters. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and measure that. Alright, so it measures at 9.5 right now. We got to go a little bit more. Okay, so this measures at 8.4 now. It's not perfect, but it'll do. Now I'm going to lock the perch in place by tightening the hex bolts again. we're good on this side of the car. We're going to do the exact same thing on the other side, and then we'll see you guys up on the front. Alright, so now onto the front. Just like the back, we raised it up on both sides to remove as much preload as possible and support with 2 jackstands. Although on the front, you do have to remove the tires. So the reason the front tires need to be removed is because the height adjuster is on the strut body, so I'm going to do that now. Now let's locate our perch, which usually sits right below the spring here. Most coilover kits will have a setup that looks just like this. If you remember our measurement, we are about 2 millimeters too high on the side, so we're going to measure the amount of thread we have exposed from the bottom of the perch. So we have about 19. Oop, moved it. Well, it was 19. To make our adjustment, first we need to loosen the locking ring with a hex key. And get it out of the way. Next, loosen the hex bolt holding the perch in place. You can use a spanner wrench for this, but it's kind of loose enough to where I can actually spin it with my hand. So to lower the car, I'm going to be turning it clockwise. Now that we've lowered it a bit, I'm going to measure it again to see if we've got it where we want it. Okay. Yep, 17. Nice. Now with that adjusted, I can go ahead and put the lock ring back in place and lock the perch in place. Now I'm going to put the tire back on and do the exact same thing on the other side. Okay, so the other side is done and we've lowered the car back down. And now we want to finish our adjustments, or recheck our adjustments to make sure that everything looks good. Before you actually measure your fender and tire distances, you want to make sure that you roll the car back and forth a bit so that you can give your new adjustments time to settle in. And it's really important because without doing this step, you're probably going to get the wrong readings. So. Also keep in mind you're going to want to turn the wheel a bit afterward to make sure that it's not hitting the fender. Yeah, just so that you have enough clearance on every side and that nothing is haphazardly touching. It looks like we've got about the perfect 342 millimeters on every side. It may take you a few times to go through the adjustment process to get exactly what you want, but I'm pretty happy with what we've come up with. Before we finish the video, we really want to talk briefly about compression and rebound adjustment. Most coilovers will only allow for compression adjustments, so if you can't find the rebound adjuster, don't worry. It was set to a static adjustment by the manufacturers. Since we have higher end coilovers, ours allow for both types of adjustment. We'll start with compression. For these coilovers, the compression adjustment is at the bottom of the dampeners. What a compression adjuster does is to allow you to increase or decrease the resistance when the strut or shock is being pushed on. For example, when you're going over a speed bump. Usually the higher you turn up the compression adjuster, the more the strut will resist being compressed and the more firm your ride will be. We have no perfect setting for compression, however we do recommend that you start at the middle setting and increase or decrease depending on your ride preference. Rebound adjustment is less common, but if your coilovers do have the option, it allows you to increase or decrease how quickly the strut will return once it's been compressed or the suspension is traveling in a downward motion. A good example of rebound is when you're driving and suddenly the road beneath you dips. Rebound adjustment is generally trickier than compression. Too little or too much rebound can negatively affect handling. That's why most coilover kits do not allow for adjustment. Again, we do recommend that you start at the middle setting and increase or decrease depending on your preference. On our coilovers, the rebound adjuster is located at the top of the shocks and requires a hex key to make the adjustment. Alright guys, so that's our adjustment video. We also have the install video of our coilovers here, so if you're interested in seeing that, check it out. Oh, and also we have a playlist of a bunch of our suspension videos as well. So if you like this video, please hit that thumbs up button. If you want to see more from us, subscribe. And if you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to leave them below, and we'll see you in our next one. Bye!